Hi, everyone. We've set up this Being an Engineer podcast as an industry knowledge repository, if you will. We hope it'll be a tool where engineers can learn about and connect with other companies, technologies, people, resources, and opportunities. So make some connections and enjoy the show.
The sales engineer job has a lot of freedom in your day-to-day job that I'm not sure a lot of people would want to give up, to be honest, once you've got a taste for it. So
hello and welcome to the Being an Engineer podcast. Today we're speaking with Brett Dooley, who is a mechanical engineer at Bosch-Rexroth. Brett collaborates with business owners and engineers to develop targeted solutions for motion control and automation challenges. He uses his wide experience in business development, industrial repair, and a decade as an electronics tech in the U.S. Navy submarine force to ensure delivery of an effective and robust automation system. And because I've known Brett for several years, I'll add that he's also just a really nice guy and a pleasure to work with. So, Brett, welcome to the show.
thank you very much, Aaron. I appreciate you having me on. It's a great podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Brett, we've worked together for several years, actually. And I don't think I've ever asked you the question, what made you decide to become an engineer?
That is such a long answer overall, but I'm going to really try hard to summarize that a little bit. So I don't know what it is about me as a kid, but I knew I was going into some sort of science and engineering for as far back as I can remember. Even went to space camp back in the day.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
awesome. So we're actually talking about sending my son soon, just because it's interesting and it's kind of fun. But I remember always being really into trying to figure out how to do things, make things work. You know, I took our broken VCR apart when I was a kid, thinking I'd be able to fix it, not realizing that it's all PCBs and stuff like that, where no 10-year-old kid can do anything to fix something like that, right? But I took it apart. I thought I'd be able to put it back together, and then it went into the trash.
Well, if that isn't a telltale sign for an engineer in the making, I don't know what is.
Taking stuff apart and throwing it away?
Well, at least the first part, taking it apart with the intention of fixing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just the confidence that you had to do that in the first place, I think that's a telltale sign of an engineer. Yeah, I'll figure it out, right? I'll take it apart and I'll figure it out.
Oh, I had no doubt in my mind I'd be able to fix it right up until I got it apart and realized there was no chance. But that's the kind of stuff I did. I went through high school. I always really concentrated on science and math and things like that. And then after high school, I was going to go into college and go into an engineering program, but, I was talking to relatives and stuff. And so I actually ended up deciding to go into the military for a little while instead. So I just delayed, going to college for the engineering degree for about a decade, but I still ended up here.
Great. Well, I definitely want to dive into the military portion of your career as well. Before we get there, let's talk a little bit about where you are right now, which is in sales. You've been there for some time. What prompted you to make that transition from, I think, correct me if I've got the timeline wrong here, but I think directly out of college, you went into a technical sales position. Is that right?
So I guess just not to get into the military part, but timeline wise, 11 years in the military. Then I went to ASU. Well, I actually went to Chandler Gilbert Community College for a little bit to finish the associates. And then I went to ASU, finished mechanical engineering degree. And then right out of the box, or right out of school, I kind of had several options, like Palo Verde Nuclear Power Plant had a job offer there because they wanted engineers with nuclear experience. A couple other companies had very traditional engineering roles open for me. And then there was a company that was a distributor for automation and motion control equipment that had a job opening and made an offer. And I just saw what they did there and looked at how they got to see 5 different projects every day. And every week you were jumping from project to project to project. And I don't know if this says something about how my brain works, but that was very attractive to me versus the concept of sitting in one spot and working on one project for an extended amount of time before you see any results. So I just really like the fact that I'm bouncing between anywhere between 5 and 20 projects in a day, and it really keeps me active and engaged. And I really enjoy that side of things. And it lets me really focus on conceptual design in a lot of ways, coming up with ideas and concepts and things like that, kind of daily basis without ever having to do the, I would say the hard work, which is actually sitting down and making it all work, which is what you guys do. But, I can fortunately stay in the conceptual world quite a bit.
That's a really good way to put it. I'm not sure I've heard someone put it in such an effective and concise way that the role of a technical sales or application engineer, you get to work on kind of the fun stuff, right? Coming up with the high level ideas, and then you get to hand it off to someone else to work out all the details. That's a really good sales pitch for a role like yours, I think. And I don't know, I could be wrong, but I get the sense that engineers who are in training, they're going to school. They might technical sales, applications engineer might not even be on their radar. And if they were to hear about it, they might say, well, that's a sales position. I'm training to become an engineer. Why would I want to do sales? And that's, I think, a really good pitch for why someone training to be an engineer might want to go into technical sales, applications engineering, because they get to see all these fun things and work on the high level ideas, but not need to get bogged down with working out all the details, which anyone who's ever done any manufacturing drawings will tell you is no fun.
Oh, absolutely. I would agree with that. Now, we do get bogged down in a lot of details quite a bit. When one of my customers asked me for a pinout for a drive to make sure all the wiring diagrams are done correctly, I can't stay in the conceptual realm for that. We need to dive in and we need to give them the correct answers. But I'm doing 10 to 20 of those a day versus concentrating on that one cable that he's trying to design, right? And so,
yeah.
So it just, I hate to throw this word out there that I'm about to throw out anyway, because it has kind of it has a connotation behind it, and it's not even that true probably, but it's a good way of saying, I think the mindset. But, you hear about, ADD, right? ADD people who need a lot of stimulation and a lot of change and a lot of, things happening. And that seems to be kind of the mindset of where I see is, I really want to move from thing to thing to thing. And do a lot of things at once. And this allows me to do that. And I have a lot of fun doing that. So I think that's the key.
What's the correct title for your role? What would you describe yourself more as technical sales or, applications engineer or both or something else entirely?
I'm very much falling into the technical sales category. Now my official title is account development manager. That implies, I think, a little bit too much of a business role for what I would say I really do on a day-to-day basis right now. Cause I really do get into the technical weeds, and help people make things work and, use my engineering degree for what I do. So I don't want to, I'm not sure I like the official job title to describe what I actually do. So technical sales is great. Applications engineer is actually a separate person at our company, and it deservedly is a separate person. They really do spend a lot more time, getting into the weeds and getting into the details of making sure everything works. In fact, I really rely on those guys to make sure that I don't give somebody bad information, because they tend to be experts in a more narrow range of technology. And so it's very difficult for me to be a broad encyclopedia of all knowledge. In fact, I can't do that. I will freely admit that I'm not that. I really rely on the applications engineers when I have a question that needs a correct answer. It has to be 100% correct from day one, to make sure that I'm on track.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. All right. So you went to school to become an engineer. You spent, 4 years there, whatever it was, and you come out the other end and you go into a sales job. How did you know that you could do sales? I mean, you just spent the past 4 years of your life, in school to become an engineer. So you have that background, and you mentioned that you certainly use that degree in technical sales, but what about the other aspect of the job, which is sales? How did you know that you could do that? Did you have some kind of special training before you got into it? What happened there?
Well, I do have a cheat code for that, that made it actually very easy. Now I'm going to tell you what it is in a second, but I got to admit, I was actually very frightened that I was making a very poor decision when I first got into it, because I felt like once I made the jump into sales, technical sales even though it still has a lot of engineering components there, that I would pretty much be guaranteeing that I would never be able to work as a traditional engineer ever again. That was the big fear I had going into the whole thing, is that I was basically writing that career path out of my life, right? And I was going to be stuck, even though I don't feel stuck now, but that was the fear at the time, is that I would be stuck in a job that, what if it doesn't work out, right? So I absolutely had that fear going in. However, in my Navy experience, I actually did about 3 years as a recruiter, in there. Which I would call, I would call that about as intense of a sales program as you could ever go through. And I got to be honest, I did not enjoy being a recruiter that much. That was not, but there was no technical there. There was no engineering there. And that's where we started this whole thing, is I really enjoy science and engineering and things like that. A military recruiter fills none of those buckets, right? So I knew I could do it because I'd done it, even if I didn't enjoy it that much. And then you bring the fun stuff in, the science, the technology, all the new stuff like that. And all of a sudden I felt like it could make it a lot of fun.
Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So it wasn't so difficult for you to go from an engineering background into sales. You mentioned that you were really scared that what if I made the wrong decision? What if I don't like this and I want to go into more of a traditional engineering role? I'm not sure if I can do that after having gone into sales. At this point, have you seen many people make that transition, spending whatever it is, 5-10 years in technical sales and then moving into more of a traditional engineering role? Is that how feasible is it for someone to make that change?
That's a great question. And I have very rarely seen it. And that might just be because the people that gravitate toward this job from the get-go are a good fit and don't always want to go back the other way. I sometimes I see business development guys for companies kind of fall over into the engineering side because they do it internally with their own company by helping and doing things like that. I'm trying to think of an example I've ever met a sales engineer who actually went to an engineering job. I'm sure they're out there, but I can't think of one. So I'm just not sure that happens that much. I think the sales engineer job has a lot of freedom in your day-to-day job that I'm not sure a lot of people would want to give up, to be honest, once you've got a taste for it. So I don't know. It's it's a fun job that, like, I keep saying that word. It's a lot of fun to be able to do what we do. So I just don't know how you would go back the other way. And at this point, I'm not really looking. So
what are some of the freedoms that you enjoy being in technical sales?
So first and foremost, any good organization that you're going to work for in this type of job allows you to run your area, whatever it is, kind of as your own business. As long as all the goals and the targets are met at the end of the day, what you do on a day-to-day basis to meet those goals is very much up to you. If you're not meeting the goals and numbers, then obviously, there could be some management discretion on what's going on. But I got to be honest, there's no difference between that and a CEO reporting to his board, right? There's no difference in how those two things go together. That CEO has to meet his minimum numbers, needs to meet everything for the board not to take over or remove him. So to me, it is completely like running your own business, other than the fact that I didn't have to buck up all the startup capital, which is really nice, not to have to do that, not to have to do fundraising on the side. I just get to do the fun part of the job. So I would say that's the big part of that I enjoy.
That's a great point. I can see how that would be attractive to a lot of people. So it sounds like it's a much more results-oriented role as opposed to, here's a task that you're going to be micromanaged on.
Absolutely. That's a great way to say it. And hopefully everybody's not out there being micromanaged too much, but it's it's nice to be in a role where you have the freedom to set your daily schedule in a way that will maximize your usefulness and productivity.
Now that infers something else, which is that people who go into technical sales really have to be motivated of their own accord, right? I mean, they can't be relying on someone else to motivate them. They need to be of the personality type that is internally driven, or else seems like that would be a tough role to handle if that wasn't the case.
Absolutely. If it would be very easy for anyone in this role to just not answer emails or phone calls and take the day off, right? But that is, there's the flip side of this whole thing is you are the point of contact for anyone you're working with. And so if the phone rings, the impulse is to answer the phone, answer the email, and that's always going to be there. If you ignore those too much, you're going to find that your customer base doesn't really want to reach out to you anymore, which is a death sentence in the sales industry, right?
Yeah.
You want people to reach out to you to ask you questions, to find out what they need. And you have to be available for that. And you're right. You have to be driven to set things up. You have to reach out to people if you haven't heard from them in a while, and keep track of that. And hopefully, and I wish I could say I did a great job of that, but I every day find myself finding someone I haven't talked to in a couple months and should probably reach out to them. And so I add them to the list for that day.
Well, I imagine that there are some engineers listening to this who might be considering going into technical sales, either now or in the future. What should they be thinking about that maybe they don't even know that they don't know at this point about that type of role?
I would honestly be very surprised if there were that many people who knew that technical sales was a career path for an actual engineer. I think a lot of people think of the sales force for any kind of engineering company as a dedicated salesman that may not even have a technical background. And there are some companies out there that do it that way. I know when I went to college, I had no idea technical sales existed. The only reason I found out about it was because I applied for a random job that was talking about automation and motion control, precision, things like that. You know, all the terms that kind of grab your attention, the cool stuff. And so I applied to the job, not even realizing that it was a technical sales role. And that's the job I ended up going with, is as I went through the interview process and met everybody, I started to understand what the job entailed, and a lot of light bulbs turned on about how fun that could be. But no one in college ever mentioned that was a role for an engineer. I don't know whether they look at that as a conflict of interest for an engineering program or why that is. But I've actually been asked to speak at high schools and colleges in the area specifically on this topic because nobody knows about it. And they want to educate their students. So there's a few schools that have been trying to broaden everyone's perspective about the type of jobs that are out there. So anyway, so I guess
it's like you found this amazing vacation spot, and the people there, they don't want to tell others about it, right? They want to keep that vacation spot nice and calm for them.
I don't know if the sales guys are trying to keep it a secret, because we're the ones out there telling everybody about everything all the time. So we're very outspoken about what's going on. I just don't know why. I don't know why students don't know about that as a career path. So I guess that doesn't answer your question at all. You asked me what they should be thinking about it, and I answered you why they don't even know that they should be thinking about it, because they don't know it exists. But once they know it exists, because now they're listening to your podcast and they know that this is a job and a career path, the things to realize is that you need to have just what we said before. You need to be able to set your schedule. You need to be able to determine what is the next step at any given point. You could look at it as a different school of thought on project management. It's all how to manage a project from start to finish. And at any given point, what is the next thing that needs to happen to keep the project on track? And if you can keep doing that and keep reaching out to the right people, that's all it takes to be successful, if you can do that. And it sounds easy. It's a sentence, but there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of technical skills that you need to have. There's a lot of engineering skills you need to have. You also need to know business. You need to be able to read a contract, right? There's a lot of items in there that have to be taken care of to be able to fill that role. But that's really the key. One thing you don't need is to be an extrovert or some sort of super people person. You don't need that.
Oh, that's a big point, because I bet a lot of people think sales and automatically, you have to be very jovial and outgoing and extroverted to do a good job in that role.
And I will agree that it probably helps, although it can be taken too far, where it gets to the point where you're working with engineers who aren't always the most outgoing. Some of them are, some of them aren't, right? And if you have a flamboyant, boisterous personality coming through the door, that isn't always that welcome either, right? So there does need to be some personality matching there for there to be a good working relationship. Just like a team of engineers inside of a company, there needs to be some sort of synergy between those guys, or women, men, whoever it is. They need to be able to talk together and get along. And it's the same thing with sales guys. That's why technical sales, you don't necessarily need that, because you need to be able to work with engineers. That's what we do. So if you come from an engineering background and you have a personality that likes engineering stuff, you're going to get along just fine.
Yeah. Well said. Well, you were a chief petty officer in the U.S. Navy submarine force for a decade, which I never knew until I started preparing for this podcast. And I was reading through your LinkedIn page and I was like, what? That's so cool. So you were heavily involved with operating and maintaining nuclear reactor plants. Now, nuclear reactor plants, I'm assuming that's the nuclear reactor in the submarine. Is that right? Or is this
Correct.
like an external plant?
No,
Okay.
it's the one that sits inside the submarine in a big compartment there.
Okay. Now, what can you tell us? I'm sure there are a lot of things, but maybe if you could pick, a couple choice nuggets, what can you tell us about working with nuclear technology that most of us probably don't even realize or appreciate?
Okay. Well, I think one of the most interesting things that I always thought was just crazy, blew my mind. And this is everybody that hasn't been involved in this industry before is going to think I'm nuts for saying this. But you get more radiation exposure on an airplane flight than you do sitting on that submarine.
Really? That is fascinating.
So the dosimeters that we wear on the submarine when we're going, we get them read periodically, and there's hardly ever anything on there because everything's shielded the way it should be. We are warned specifically never to wear that thing on an airplane flight because it'll come back and we'll all get flagged as having huge exposure on the submarine. And they'll have to do all these reviews.
Hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my God.
So they'll have to do all these reviews on how you got exposed and what did we do wrong and blah, blah, blah. And it was all just a plane flight.
So, extrapolating from there a little bit, this is outside your expertise. I'm just rambling a little bit. Does that mean that flight attendants and airline pilots are at higher risk of radiation poisoning than, your average Joe?
Well, I think radiation poisoning is probably strong because it takes a very severe dose to actually get any kind of radiation poisoning. But there might be elevated risks of cancer or something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. All right. Great. I cut you off. Please continue.
Oh, no, that's fine. That was always the thing that blew my mind the most. The other thing, I guess, which is not nearly as exciting, I don't think I'm going to get the same reaction out of you, is that the day-to-day job of a nuclear reactor operator is to stare at a wall of gauges that doesn't move. And if it ever does move, well, that's a problem. But
I can see why you transferred to sales.
Yeah. It was very much sitting for hours and hours and hours watching things not move and hoping.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So you had to come up with ways to pass the time that didn't distract you from the job.
What, please share an example of some of these ways. I mean, what do you do to keep yourself occupied but not distracted?
Mainly just a lot of conversations. In the room where you sit in, there's 4 people. There's an engineering officer. You've got the guy running the throttles that make the propeller move. And you've got the guy to your right that's actually running the entire electrical distribution network. He's got control of all the main breakers and everything to make sure that no emergencies happens on the electrical side. You're sitting right in the middle of all that. And everybody just kind of talks, cause there's nothing else you can do. You're not allowed to, there's no cell phones. You can't have a cell phone in there to distract you. You're just stuck talking. The guys outside that are actually out in the engineering, spaces, the engine room, they're walking around, they're taking logs, they're cleaning up as they need to, things like that. But when you're stuck in the box actually monitoring the reactor, I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do because your job is literally to stare at that panel.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, what were the scariest and most exciting times during that period working with nuclear reactors? Hopefully nothing too crazy, but anything that stands out? So
the only time I was actually scared, is our submarine. So this is the USS Georgia, if you want to look it up, 729. It actually got converted to a guided missile submarine while I was finishing my tour there. But we were in dry dock at the shipyard where we dock, and that's Bangor over near Seattle, west side of Seattle, a little west of Bremerton. we were in dry dock. This would have been in the 2003, 2004-ish time frame. There was a big earthquake. I don't remember the exact number, but it was like 7 or 8, I think. 6 or 7 or 8. It was big enough to be really scary, damaged a lot of buildings. But a submarine on dry dock, that means you're sitting on concrete blocks, which are sitting on a big pile of concrete, which is directly connected to the bedrock of the ground. So if you want to talk about a easy path for shock waves to get through, it's all perfect. It's like copper for electricity, right? Everything was just perfect to transmit all the shock and vibration right to the hull of the submarine. Jeez. So, and also, if you ever find a picture of a submarine sitting in dry dock, the blocks that you're sitting on are actually only kind of under the middle. They don't go very far out because normally everything's still and there's so much mass there that nothing could happen. So you're actually on a pretty narrow platform. And then the walkway, the gangway that goes between the submarine and the edge of the dry dock for people to walk in and off, it's just sitting there. It's not tied down because it's so heavy that normally it's not a problem.
Yeah.
So this earthquake kicks off. I'm back in the engine room and the entire place just starts shaking more than I can ever imagine. And, we all assumed that one of the turbines or something like that threw a bearing. Yeah, we had no idea. We were getting calls back from the captain over the speaker system asking us what's going on. We, of course, don't know what's going on, so we're asking them what's going on. Nobody knows it's an earthquake because there's no way to really transfer that information that quickly. And by the time anybody figured it out, it was over. Fortunately, nobody got hurt. Everybody took cover. The gangway actually somehow managed to stay in place. The ship managed to stay on the dry dock blocks. But it was probably as scared as I've ever been sitting in that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, how lucky that nothing happened.
It was amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
Count your blessings. All right. Well, in what ways do you think being in the Navy has helped you as an engineer? And are there ways that the rest of us can develop those skills or behaviors without being in the military? Not that we don't want to be in the military, but if we just don't have that opportunity. That's
a great question. I did think about that a little bit before we came on, what kind of advice I could give you. It is a very different job. There's so many differences to what you're doing between the two. I think the one thing I really thought of was that the military, when something happens and it needs to be taken care of, your focus is 100% on that problem from start to completion. And it never stops unless somebody comes and completely takes over for you and there's a complete turnover of responsibility. But that only happens, once a day or maybe a half day or whatever the long shifts are. So it really is your project and you're focused on that project, that problem, 100% start to finish, to the exclusion of a lot of other things. And when I just said that, I thought of how I'm going to contradict myself in just a second. But just to finish the thought, the same way when someone calls me up and asks a question about something, that kind of becomes my focus 100% for a time period until I get the answer and I get it to them. Now maybe I have 3 of those standing in line and there's only so much you can do about that, but you need to get them an answer and it needs to be right and you need to get it to them as quick as they can so they can keep doing their job. So I would say the military really gave that focus where I don't think I would have had that before. And maybe that was all that staring at gauges for hours at a time. Or maybe it was boot camp or maybe it was something else, but it really gives you that focus. And that's an important behavior, I think, is for just any job is to be able to focus your attention. Okay. Now I'm going to contradict myself.
Okay.
I am in the middle of stuff all the time and an email comes in with a quick question or something that I just need to get back out of my hands into somebody else's hands so that something can continue. And it's also a very important skill to be able to identify those kind of things. Something where if I take 5 seconds out of my day right now and reply to it and get it out of my hair, then I don't have to have it in the backlog. And I don't even really have to do that much because it's not me that has to do it. It's this other guy, but I am in the way because the person reached out to me with a question. I need to pass that along to someone else. And if I sit on that time clock of that other person doing their job doesn't even start until I get my email out, right? So so if there's enough people in that chain reaction, you could be looking at weeks before you get a response if everybody waited to get to that thing in their queue, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I can identify with that. And I say, if that's something I could take care of 5 seconds and then get back to what I was doing, then I should just do that. And so there's both of those in there, which are completely contradictory now that I say it. But the ability to focus and I guess leave that focus and then come back to it quickly, is important. I don't know how good of an answer that was. How can you learn that? That's a great question for a psychologist. I'm not sure I can really answer that. Practice it. Be aware that any roadblock you put up can get magnified as it goes through everyone putting roadblocks up, so that whatever you can do to minimize that roadblock on your end can help significantly in the long run.
I'm going to go in a little bit different direction here. It sounds like your experience watching gauges that never changed and thus having to figure out some way to distract yourself, which ended up being just talking with other people there in the room. It sounds like that may have been a pretty good training ground for getting into sales as well, just learning how to talk with people and have conversations. Is there any truth to that?
That's probably true, although I'm sure everybody's heard the expression "talking like a sailor." And what that inclines. I'm pretty sure this is a family-oriented podcast, so I don't want to say more than that. But there's a lot of undoing that had to happen in there too.
Yeah,
but yes,
fair enough.
I agree with you. There's just a lot of talking. But now, granted, it was the same people, for months at a time. The same 3 or 4 people. So, but yeah, absolutely. There's probably a lot of that there.
All right. Well, I'm going to take a very short break and share with the listeners that teampipeline.us is where you can learn more about how we help medical device and other product engineering or manufacturing teams develop turnkey equipment, custom fixtures, and automated machines to characterize, inspect, assemble, manufacture, and perform verification testing on your devices. We're speaking with Brett Dooley today, who is currently working with Bosch-Rexroth. Brett, what can you tell us about how engineers leverage the products that Bosch offers?
I thought a lot about how to talk about our product line without being a sales pitch. I've thought a lot about this.
I'm excited to hear how you're going to pull this off.
Yeah, because I don't want this to be a sales pitch. I'm not doing this as to try to convince everybody to run out to Walmart and buy some Bosch-Rexroth stuff. However, what engineers find, and let me preface this. Nobody on the West Coast hardly knows who Bosch-Rexroth is. We have always, our key industries have almost always been the auto industry, which means, the Rust Belt, all those areas, they all know who we are. We're industry standard in a lot of the factories there. And on the West Coast, very few people know unless they've been involved in that industry. Or, we do have a small, foothold in some semiconductor manufacturing equipment, things like that. But that's about it. Most people don't know that we exist and what our product line is. The people who do know, and here's the part I've been struggling with, and I didn't figure out a better way to say it. We have, you can look it up. You can go across any company. We have the broadest line of automation equipment of any company out there. We have everything from hydraulics to robotics to servos to motion control. We have mobile robots. We have everything you can think of. We have it in our catalog, and it all works together, and it all does a good job of communicating and doing the job it needs to do. Okay. So that doesn't answer your question yet. So why do engineers like working with our stuff? In general, it's because it's just easy to get configured. It's easy to use. And it saves them time in their design process. So whether that's through our helping them with their design process and answering their questions and getting them what they need, but a lot of the equipment just works well. It had a lot of good design behind it, and there is several tools in the toolbox to make things easy. I don't know how great a question or a great answer that was, but that's how we help.
I thought that was terrific, and I don't think you need to be that worried about coming off as too salesy. I mean, legitimately, people listening to this, they're engineers, and some of them are doing automation. So to learn about a new supplier, a new vendor like this, I think that's useful. So I think that's totally fine. Okay. And maybe talk a little bit about in what ways can engineers lighten their load and help multiply their efforts by leaning on, I'll say you, but I'm going to refer to like the global you, whoever their technical sales representative is. How can they multiply their efforts by leaning on their sales reps?
Absolutely. So first, I would suggest looking and developing enough of a relationship with the sales reps for the companies you want to work with and develop some trust there. Do some work with them enough that you can trust what they're doing is accurate and going to help you. Because the next thing I'm going to recommend is to stop doing so much work yourself. I have literally teams of applications engineers sitting in our offices around the United States who are there to do engineering work for us and for you. They come in, we have a project for them. Someone wants to know the best way to do this, and they look at the catalog and they do all the specs crunching and they do the load calculations, see how much torque is needed to do the job, and they put all that together into a final configuration and they present it to you along with the work they did to get there and show you why that's going to do what you need it to do. And all of that was just a matter of the engineer at the company that we're talking about being willing to throw this information over the wall and get the results back with almost zero work on their part. There is some pre-work in there. So, they need to have a set of specs to begin with, right? We need to know the mass. We need to know how fast it needs to go, things like that. So there's some pre-work. Those things need to be figured out, and we can't answer that stuff because it's not our system at the end of the day. It's not our product getting made or manufactured so we need to know certain things about the process. But then a lot of work can get done for you. And having some trust with the sales organization to be able to get you the right answers is a huge, huge help to lightening your workload.
Yeah, I'll second all that. One of the younger engineers here at Pipeline the other day, or maybe it was a few weeks ago or something, I was talking with him, and he had an experience with it. I don't know if it was you or if it was someone else, but it was with a technical sales representative. And this young engineer here was telling me, I was blown away at how much work that they would do for me. I had no idea that there was a resource out there like that. I thought I would just have to do all this work, but no, I just, handed it off to the sales rep, and they came back with all these answers. Another experience I'm thinking about right now, another engineer on our team, which I think was working directly with you on this one recently, and he was quoting a project. He was doing actually a concept phase of a project for which one of the deliverables was a concept design and a quote for the full development. And he was able to get all the CAD models from you for the automation equipment, and there was some like acceleration curves and things like that he got, and all this stuff that he would have had to spend hours and hours and hours trying to dig up himself or just create outright from scratch. He was able to get from you and your team and put together this like really nice looking concept. It looked like it was fully engineered, because they had all the right CAD models in there, all the automation components were in there, and he had all the graphs and everything, and he was able to put that together in a pretty reasonable amount of time, given all the content that we ended up delivering to our customers. So situations like that, it's so useful and valuable to have good technical sales reps that you can work with. And I think especially a lot of younger engineers just don't realize how much how valuable a resource that is, and that it's okay. Not just that it's okay, but you're supposed to tap into that resource. You don't have to feel guilty about it, right?
Absolutely. There's absolutely no reason for guilt, because if you don't tap into it, somebody else is, and they're taking that valuable engineering time that you could have had access to. That is something that I see a lot in younger engineers, not mainly because they don't know about it, but it's across the board. There's a lot of people that have trouble letting go of the process, right? And it's hard to let somebody else. And so even if we do something for them, they still go back and redo it all, which is fine. For the first few times, do that if that makes you feel more trust in it. But we're hoping at some point we can develop a level of trust where everybody's comfortable kind of throwing things over the wall, getting the answer back and moving on. And I would like to clarify, there's no right time in the process to get that started. Well, I guess the sooner the better is the way I look at it. A lot of times I work with people that don't even know what the project really is yet. They're just kind of in a very conceptual phase. Maybe it's something new. Maybe it's a little bit R&D-ish, because it hasn't been done before, things like that. And I've heard people say, well, I'm not going to reach out to you yet because we don't know what we're doing yet. And I say, okay, well, that's fine. However, we have all these nice little sheets that you can fill out to ask about specs and targets and things like that maybe you don't know the answers yet. But guess what? We're going to ask for those answers someday. And if you go into your design process knowing all these parameters that are going to have to be defined at some point, it's going to make your job a lot easier because it'll give you some focus. It'll make you think of things that you wouldn't think of otherwise, right? And so there's all these ways you can leverage just all the stuff that we've got sitting there to help the design process. And then if it's later in the process, maybe you've got a fully featured statement of work, everything's ready to go. Well, that's even better as far as, our work is concerned, because we can just take that and turn it around and give you a final proposal without you having to really be involved too much more at that point. So there's lots of scales in there, but the earlier the better is the way I look at it. But at any point in the process, please reach out and let us know how we can help.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I can say from experience, Britt, that you've always been such a delight to work with. You're smart and you're responsive and you're creative and always willing to share your knowledge with us, even if it isn't directly related to a sale. And I'm curious to hear about kind of what your philosophy is on sales and what principles you follow that make you so easy to work with. And maybe you can answer that within the context of, let's say that I'm an engineer listening to this and I'm not fortunate enough to be in your particular area. What attributes should I be looking for in the salesperson that I might work with that are going to say to me, yeah, this is a person that I want to establish a relationship of trust with and start working with?
Sure. 100% first thing is responsiveness. If somebody emails me or gives me a call, even if I don't have time to talk to them right away, I let them know that I got their message as soon as I can, so that they're not sitting there wondering. I don't know if you've ever been ghosted on a text chain, right? Where you sit there a week later and you say, hey, this person never got back to me. That's no good, right? Projects don't stop while you're waiting for answers. So maybe I don't have time today and I can get to it at the end of the week. I'm going to let them know that I got the message. I don't have time to do it right now. And I will get to it at whatever that date might be, just so there's no question. And if that's an issue, then they can come back and say, hey, I hear what you're saying. I have a report due tomorrow and I can't wait for that. Is there anything you can do? And then I could say, let me see, right? And work on that. So somebody that's willing, to really be responsive is 100% the person you want to be spending your time with in this type of role. The second thing is I guess I should say they, right? Because you're asking about, sales engineer qualities. They should not have a scarcity mindset. I don't know if you've ever heard people talking about that before, but if you go out into the world realizing that there's so much business out there that all you can try to do is keep up with the amount of work that you can keep up with, if that's kind of your mindset, rather than every time a project comes your way, you're going to pound it into the ground until you get that money, right? Those are kind of two different ways of looking at it. I am much more on the side of believing that there's so much work out there that I would never have time for it all anyway. I need to focus on relationships. When something comes my way, if it isn't a good fit for what I can offer them, I need to tell them that. And even better, tell them where to go that is a good fit, because I've been around enough to have seen what everybody specializes in. And I could probably save them a lot of time by just referring them to the right person. That would even save them time versus doing it through me. If I tried to shoehorn my company into a project that just isn't a good fit for them. It's just better for everyone if we know where our niche is and we stay there, and if something doesn't fit, we let it go. And you can't do that if you're so worried about tomorrow's paycheck or tomorrow's commission check or whatever it is that you keep leading people down the wrong path. That's a recipe for failure in the long run. Nobody's going to want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah. Amen. Well said. Well, just a couple more questions and we can end. See, I'm trying to decide which ones I want to ask. Let's start with this one. What are the biggest challenges that you face at work?
So I would say probably the biggest challenge is just brand recognition, name recognition right now, and people knowing who to call. Like I said, Rexroth does not have a big footprint in the western side of the United States right now. And part of the reason why I came on board was to be somewhat of a brand ambassador, and provide a lot of outreach about what we can do to try to change that a little bit. So having the name recognition, so when somebody has a problem in front of them, they know who to call. That's 100% of my job in a lot of ways. And so that's also the challenge that I'm, focusing on. Doing a lot of things to try to increase that through networking, through referrals, things like that. But that's most of it. I need people to know about us and have it in their mind.
Okay. All right. Well, Brett, how can people get in touch with you?
Okay. So best way is either email or a phone call. I would say if you just put my email address in there, brett.dooley@bosch.com. That's about as easy as an email I think I can get. You're welcome to give me a call on my work phone, 510-605-6751. And then if you throw Bosch-Rexroth into Google, you'll get right to our website. You can see everything we've been talking about. And there's ways to contact through there, but they're not going to go directly to me.
Great. And we'll have some links in the show notes as well. All right. Well, Brett, anything else that we haven't talked about that you think we should?
Oh man, it's really hot outside and I'm a little tired of the summer. So I'm getting ready for wintertime. Although in the wintertime, I always sit there and say I'm ready for the heat. So it's just an endless cycle. That's about all I can think of right now.
Yeah. We're having a little reprieve from the heat this week, even here in Arizona. It's only supposed to be up to about 100 degrees this week, as opposed to the 110 plus we've been having lately.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot still, but man, it feels good. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Brett. Well, what a delight talking to you. Thank you so much for spending some time with me on the podcast. And I'm sure you and I will talk soon again.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me.
I'm Aaron Monker, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing turnkey equipment, custom fixtures, and automated machines, and with product design, visit us at teampipeline.us. Thanks for listening.